So it is that feeling of you giving your kid up for adoption and you still live in the house and you don't parent, but you obviously have an opinion on what it is. And so it just feels like you've lost something about yourself. Like, because I identified so much with the success of Health-Ade and what Health-Ade was and is, like, to have something felt like it was taken away from you in that sense, like whether it be the decision rights or maybe even a comment or observation, like it eats away at you.
I'm Sammi Cohen, and this is Social Currency, a podcast that unpacks the stories that are shaping business, culture, and the intersection of the two. From hand bottling kombucha in an apartment kitchen to building a wildly successful brand sold in tens of thousands of stores across the country, Vanessa Dew's entrepreneurial journey is nothing short of remarkable. As the co-founder of Health-Ade Kombucha, Vanessa turned a niche wellness drink into a household name, all while holding true to the company's artisanal roots. But Vanessa didn't just build a company. She built an entire movement. When Health-Ade was acquired in 2021, she faced the emotional reality of giving up control of her first child, the business, while staying on the team. And 2 years later, she officially stepped away and had to redefine what success means to her in her second act as advisor and investor. And actually, since the taping of this conversation, Health-Ade was fully sold to Generous Brands for $500 million. In this conversation, Vanessa opens up about the scrappy beginnings, the hardest decision she had to make while building her business, what it really feels like to exit, and how she's now paying it forward by backing the next generation of founders. This is Vanessa Dew's Social Currency. Vanessa, welcome to Social Currency.
Thanks for having me, Sammi.
So I want to start with the beginning. And I'd love to hear from you the initial insight or frustration that led you to believe that kombucha could be a big business.
Yeah, so when we first started, me and my co-founders, we were in the farmer's market. We were making kombucha at nights and weekends, and when we started our 9-to-5 jobs, and we were selling on the weekends. And what we were seeing time and time again is that not only were people craving something healthier and better for them in terms of their daily beverage choices, but also gut health was just a huge trending item, like not so much in the media, but definitely people were saying like, oh, this is going to be great for my gut. My doctor says I need probiotics in my life. So that was constantly the conversation that we're having with customers at the farmer's market. And that's why I always suggest having customer feedback, because they'll tell you what they're needing and what's trending. You'll hear it. And that was the insight, was gut health.
And I also heard that you had dabbled around with other ideas for companies. And so I'd also love to hear about what some of those ideas were and what led you to then decide, okay, no, kombucha is going to be it.
Yeah. Well, this was a really fun time for me and my co-founder. So I was in business school at the time. We all knew we wanted to start our own business somehow, some way. And we started with the problem, whatever the problem was for us. And some of those problems led to businesses like living in LA, you can never find a parking spot. And so we're like, why don't we do this app that you can get a parking spot wherever you're trying to go in real time? Another idea was, our co-founder, he's big into grilling meats and barbecuing. And so at the time, he really wanted a smart thermometer because he wanted to walk away and be able to come back and not do this whole contraption. And so we had this whole thermometer set up for meats that he was trying to grill. And then our other idea was, it's not my problem because I don't have really skinny calves, but sometimes for the really skinny calf girls, if you wear slouchy boots, it'll just really fall down and not get you the structured look that you want. And so we thought that we could do this little attachment, like a glue piece, if you will, to keep your boots up. So those were some of the ones that didn't make the cut.
Wow, the slouchy boots. And it also, I think the slouchy boots speaks to the era of when you were starting the company.
I know. Oh my
I'm trying to think when I was wearing slouchy boots, and that tracks.
Yeah.
Okay, so
dating me.
Me too. So Health-Ade, when you decided, okay, we are going into the kombucha business, we are going to obviously create it ourselves. Walk me through the process. I believe you were in your co-founder's apartment. What was that like?
Yeah, so we had initially started brewing kombucha because I had just a very expensive, unhealthy habit with Starbucks. And my other co-founder, he just needed some gut health reinforcements. And our other partner, she was a nutritionist. So we started brewing in the kitchen just to make sure that we had the best brew. One of the failed ideas turned into Health-Ade was actually creating kombucha for hair loss. And so that's where this whole idea really started, is we thought we were going to create a hair loss mask. Now, we pushed that to the side and decided to sell kombucha in the farmer's market to drink. And over time, the apartment started to just become overrun with these glass jars to ferment. But the only thing that we knew was to build more, because the demand was just increasing on us with every market we entered. So we just started buying more of these glass jars from Bed Bath & Beyond, rest in peace now. But so we just started building, and at a certain point, we wanted to go to a co-manufacturer. We wanted to get this out of our apartments and the commercial kitchen that we were working in. But at this time, there was no one who really wanted to touch fermentation and actually do it the way we wanted to do it. So what that meant was for long periods of holding time to actually let the ferment take place, lots of space for these glass jars. So we explored different ways to make it, but in the end, it wasn't yielding the quality that we wanted. So we were almost forced into making it ourselves, and we just started growing it that way because it was literally by sheer grit and determination to build out these glass jars to make it.
Were the glass jars a decision to have the product be perhaps more fresh, or why specifically glass? Because I see not just Health-Ade, but if you look at a kombucha aisle, it's pretty much all glass. So why is that?
Yeah. So initially, when we were making it, we're very much purists. And so we wanted to make sure we're making with the highest quality, not just the highest quality, but the best tasting. And so we were buying the ingredients retail from Whole Foods, the worst possible COGS you could probably imagine. Yeah. And glass was important to us because kombucha, and specifically the SCOBY, is highly detoxifying, so it'll start to leach off of plastic materials. And so it was important to not have a packaging that would basically be in opposition of what we're trying to do, which is to impart healthy particles into your gut versus taking bad stuff in and putting it into your system.
Okay, so you are at these farmers markets. You're clearly talking to customers. They're very interested in what you're selling. And walk me through how you were able to go from farmers market to retail. Was this you going individually to store locations and speaking to buyers in Los Angeles? What was that like?
Yeah. So, farmers markets, if you've ever worked one, or any listener actually working one, it's early mornings, hard work. The actual net of what you make in a day for the business is maybe $100 to $200 a day. You can't actually have a strong, healthy, scalable business in the farmer's market. And so for us, we're like, well, how are we going to grow this thing? And naturally, just restaurants were coming over to our farmer's market booth to pick up cases at a time. Wow. And we're like, why don't we just start doing more of this, since we can just deliver it and we can get more dollars per case than just literally standing in the hot sun selling bottle to bottle. And so we hired 1099 reps, and they were everyone from family, friends, people on Craigslist who seemingly looked the brand, could talk, didn't offend people. We had 27 of them the first day that we trained everyone, and we sent them out into the world to basically knock on doors, cold call. And they were our de facto sales team at the time. We also did that too. And we just went store to store to ask them if they wanted to buy in on Health-Ade. And then we started our own delivery route. We had no distribution at this time. So it was really the school of hard knocks, trying to get into wholesale just on our own in the beginning.
And when you say you started your own delivery route, does that mean someone was just driving these around to stores? So you were literally the logistics provider as well?
Yes. So we bought a truck. We bought one of those big vans, refrigerated it. And before we hired a delivery driver, we were the delivery people. Yeah. So we would share the routes. We would probably do about 27 to 30 stops in a day. Wow. Because at our peak, when we were doing this, we're probably at about 300 stores in Los Angeles, self-delivering. So, and everyone wanted delivery weekly because we were just ramping up in our velocity.
Wow.
Yeah.
You are clearly needing capital to sustain this fast growth. So what was that first round of capital like? How did you get the first capital into the business?
Wow. So this was, I definitely think luck plays into a lot of founders' lives, and this was luck for sure. So one of the locations that we were dropping off Health-Ade to was the Brentwood Farm Shop. And it's probably where it's more of like a boutique Air one, if you will. Like definitely emerging brands, up and coming, premium brands. And just so happens that our investors found a bottle of Health-Ade there, took a picture, sent it to their, principals and LPs, and said, you got to check this brand out. Meanwhile, we were toiling just every day trying to make as much as we can because we were growing so fast. We needed to make more. We had all quit our jobs at that point, and we needed capital. We were just in the midst of a Kickstarter when these investors had called our Google Voice number and left a voicemail on this Google Voice that didn't even have like our company name on it. It's like, leave a number at the tone. And he said, hey, we're interested. Call us back. We're investors and we want to get to know you. So that was our fateful call, end of July. And we eventually got funded with our Series A in October of 2013.
And how far after you had initially started selling at the farmers markets was that first capital?
So we started markets in March of 2012. And so we closed our Series A in October of 2013. So it was about a year and a half. Yeah. And for that first year, we were, bootstrapping, growing naturally, took some loans from our parents and growing it. But it hit a point in the summer of 2013 when we were growing so fast, like we couldn't pay our credit card bill. Wow. And we needed capital to further grow. Beverage, CPG is very capital intensive, let alone beverage. Yeah. And so it is, you need the money to grow.
Yeah. And it just sounds so surreal to me, honestly, the fact that you were obviously working your butts off day in and day out, probably working every single weekend, 12-hour weekends, exhausting. But then you just get a call from investors.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't happen anymore, especially in CPG. It does happen, but once again, you have to be kind of right place, right time for that to happen.
Totally.
So I think looking at that situation now, do you feel as if that was, had you not gotten that capital in, would you have been going to investors to try to pitch the company, or maybe you were at that time?
Yeah, I mean, we weren't pitching actively at that point because we were just winding down our Kickstarter. It was like our last week or two. Then I think we would have assessed, like, okay, where do we go from here? Mm-hmm. Do we make a play at Shark Tank? Do we then go out and pitch like 1 million investors, build angel? We didn't hit that juncture yet, but it probably would have been. And it was a time when money was like flush in the private equity investment world, and it was kind of just like go, 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 which it really changed in the last 5 to 6 years. So for us, we again hit it at the right time. We put ourselves in places like to be timing and luck coinciding, right? Like who would have thought to put our product there where investors found it? Definitely happenstance and luck was on our side.
You spoke about the change in the larger CPG industry in terms of the capital that's going into this space, and it certainly has, and we'll talk about that. But I'm curious to hear about the subsequent rounds of capital too. So you raised your first round about a year after starting the company, and beverage is extremely expensive. As you said, you need so much capital to not only just produce the product, but to market it. So how did your next rounds of capital go after that initial one?
Yeah, I mean, luckily, like our investors really not just believed in us, but the product and the company and the brand we were building. So we really had our lead investors follow on and continue with the brand. So that is also very, I think, important in a fundraising journey for us and for other founders, like to have an investor believe in you like that. I will say personally, and I know my co-founder would agree, like when we raised our Series B, we felt like a failure because I don't think we quite knew the game of fundraising and how much we'll actually need because we're such high achievers and we're like, well, we're only going to take the Series A, we're going to grow it to kingdom come and then c'est la vie and we're good. And so we felt like failures because we had to go back to raise money. And, I had my dad in my ear saying like, a company actually makes money. Like, when are you doing that? So I had that kind of on like a chip on my shoulder, if you will. So, after I took the emotion out of it, the subsequent rounds went fine because, okay, I knew the game now that we were playing. But that A to B round personally hit me hard from an achievement standpoint.
Yeah. The fact that you did not take any chips off of the table. So for people listening who may not know what I'm referring to here is that when founders are starting these companies, even if you get this round of capital in from institutional investors, whether that's private equity, venture capital, it doesn't mean that the founder has all of this money and they probably are taking a salary, of course, especially if they're at that level. But it's not like you are flush with cash because everything that you've built is still in the company.
Yeah.
And I've read that you did not take any of your shares off or sell them to any other parties until the exit.
Right.
So talk me through that decision.
So, in hindsight, I may have made a different decision, but I was just thinking through single round. Like, I believe in this and I'm going to I'm all in. And not to say that founders who take chips off the table are not. I actually recommend founders to take chips off the table in funding rounds, actually. But I just didn't, I think I was too naive to know that game. But then also, I was like, no, I'm going to roll this and parlay into as big of an outcome as I can. And so that had its effects too, because, from 2012 to, let's say, 2021, all the chips are rolled into Health-Ade for me. And as not just the stakes get harder and bigger, it's, you're working for a salary. So then it becomes like, well, when is the end, right? Like, when is that exit? What does it look like? So at a certain point, you start to become a little bit, I think I became very pessimistic a little bit. I was like, oh, I'm just holding out to the end. There's an optimism that turned to pessimism, actually. Yeah. And then I also think taking some chips off the table allows you to sustain in the business even better or longer because you have a cushion or you have your nest egg there. And for me, it started to feel like everything was about making Health-Ade the biggest and best it could be. It became like this negative feedback cycle a little bit. But at the end, I still am very happy about the decision, but I also didn't have a family to think about. I didn't have anyone depending on me from a financial standpoint. It was just me and myself, and I was able to roll with it. So maybe if I was in a different situation, it'd roll out differently, but I'm happy about the outcome. I just know that it had its effects too, in sometimes negative ways.
Yes. It's not super common for there to be 3 co-founders of companies. Of course it happens, but I would love to hear from your perspective how each of you brought something new to the table. Did each of you have your own vertical within the company? And if so, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. So I think the best part about Health-Ade, separate from the brand or the business, is that we're still super tight today. I just went to the spa with Dinah yesterday, and they're obviously still married. So very successful co-founding relationship. But within the business, in the beginning, all founders, co-founder or solo, trying to do everything they can. And over time, we realized where our sweet spots were. And I remember one day we rolled out a piece of butcher paper and literally put every single task that was in the business at that time, in 2012, on this butcher paper. And we obviously aggregated them where it was naturally a marketing or a sales or production or operations. And I think we just and then once we put it all up on the butcher paper, we all just stood next to the one where we naturally felt a tie to or felt most comfortable with. And for me, it was sales. For Dinah, it was marketing. And for Justin, it was operations and manufacturing. And so, I'll say myself, and I tell my husband this too, I am not going to be that, operational detail person. I'm not in the micro. I can push myself to be, but it exhausts me at the end of the day. It makes me kind of resent the business that I'm in. I don't love it. And I would say the same, Dinah would say the same thing. And so, and we're also so optimistic, the what ifs. Justin really held us to the ground in some ways. He was more the realist than anything. So we all brought complementary aspects. And more than anything, we were there to trust each other and pick each other up when we needed to. And there's something really special in that. And, our communication, I think, was second to none.
I love to hear that. And it sounds like each of you and this is very lucky, or maybe you were all drawn together in some way because you each had these natural inclinations towards separate areas of the business where it may have been somewhat of a negotiation if two people were like, I love sales. Sales is my category. And yet someone else has to do marketing. So it sounds like it was truly a great match for all three of you to work together.
It really was. And, again, we were making it ourselves. And so whoever, in order to make things fair sometimes, to that point about fighting over something, production was also something no one ever wanted per se. And so we always felt bad. So we would rotate month to month who is in charge of production, but it actually obviously doesn't lend to continuity and whatnot. So, and we felt bad whoever got that straw that month. And so we always try to make it up to that person. But in the end, like, we knew where our strengths really were. And I think that's why we just work so well. And also we call ourselves a trifecta, and it worked because we were able to tackle things stronger together.
Yeah. So speaking to the production piece, because earlier before this taping, you and I were chatting about how difficult it can be to take a product like kombucha that has these active strains, the Scooby. I'm like Scooby-Doo, the Scooby. And it's such a delicate process. So can you share a story or perhaps the mindset around taking such an artisanal product that some would say is even a bespoke product because it's so nuanced and specific, and how you take a product like that and you scale it, because that's incredibly difficult to do. So can you walk me through how you thought through that whole process?
So first and foremost, we always had the thought or the mission or the true north that we were led by, we always wanted the highest quality, best tasting product. Like, that never wavered for us. And so that really illuminated how we made decisions too. So, like I mentioned, we were looking for co-manufacturers, but we really couldn't find one that met the grade. So we were forced to do it ourselves, really. And so that's an example of really not just going with our gut, but really with our product and like what made the best product. And so for us, we knew how to make it in these glass jars. We knew that if we made more of it in the glass jars, we would have more of the same high quality product. And so honestly, by grit, determination, like, we fashioned our initial production around these glass jars, but then that in of itself takes capital gumption to make sure we get the engineering right around it. And so when we built out our initial facility, it was with this idea that we're going to have thousands of these glass jars brewing at any given time, and we did. That we also didn't have necessarily the team to fashion it any other way. We were just newcomers to this world, knowing one way, and we, by almighty strength, we're just going to make it happen. And that's really how we grew it for the first few years. And we made it work. I can't say it was the healthiest for us because it was like physically hard and also mentally tough, but we gritted our way through it.
In terms of the hard decisions that you had to make, can you think of any unpopular decisions that you specifically had to make? And I'm curious if there were ever times where you had a decision to make, but perhaps your co-founders weren't on the same page, or maybe not even the co-founders, but investors or some strategic partner of some kind.
I think some of the hardest decisions for me were around people. Letting certain people go, keeping certain people on. People always are, I think, the wild card in making the hardest decisions. And so I remember there were 2 or 3 times when I had made the decision to let someone go. And actually the very, very first person I ever let go in my life happened to be BFFs with our investor. And, they were also a recommendation from our investor at that time. And that was a really hard process because I'm like, oh my gosh, this investor's going to hate me. How is this going to go down? I'm going to look like the bad guy here. And so I just remember that part so vividly because I had all these like thoughts of doubt in terms of like letting this person go, but it wasn't the best thing for the business to keep this person around anymore. And so when I ultimately let that person go, we parted ways. It ultimately was fine, but it wasn't a popular decision amongst, that board table very, very early on in business. And so I just had to live through it and just hold my head high that it was the best decision for the business.
Yeah. I think when you're so crystal clear on the larger mission, which is, as you said earlier, it's to create the best tasting product and the highest quality, and you know what really needs to happen for the business, it's easier to make that kind of more cutthroat decision that may not be popular because ultimately you're still laddering up to what you need to do.
Yeah, 100%. Honestly, the easiest decisions were about like cutting budget and like, this is not, going to yield sales or this is not incrementally going to help us. Like those were always the easiest ones. It was always product and people, I would say, were the hardest ones.
Yeah. And so over the years, you have scaled Health-Ade to a massive success by really anyone's standard. I'd say the Health-Ade story to me seems like the quintessential CPG success. You have founders who give it their all. They are able to build a product, a brand that's much larger than what they initially started with, that's loved by millions of consumers around the world. And you had an exit, which is amazing. So let's talk about that side of the equation. One of your earliest investors acquired a majority stake in Health-Ade in 2021. So what was that whole acquisition like?
Any founder will say like an acquisition or any process related to your business is so emotional and mentally taxing and pulls you in every direction. So emotional is like the first word I would say because, this is our first baby in that sense. And so we wanted to make sure that everything was done in light of what's best for the brand. So that's first and foremost. And we're lucky in that our investors have been with us from the beginning. So they also want the same things. So that was great. But negotiating everything was just lawyers complicate things sometimes needlessly, right? And so that was an issue as well. And when you think about the day-to-day, you still need to keep the train on the tracks, like the actual business. Like things are not slowing down because this transaction's happening. And so, personally, I was also pregnant at that time. And so I just remember being emotional about everything. And it didn't even have to be something that was deeply cutting. It was the smallest, most nostalgic thing. And so for me, I had that other nuance of just being pregnant at the time. And, I think something that you're so deeply tied to and you work so intimately with, like your first business, naturally you're going to feel both a burden and a responsibility. And also, I was like ready. I was like, I am ready for this to be done. Yeah.
Yes. What's something that people misunderstand or perhaps don't fully know about what happens when your company is acquired, but you stay on? Because you had an interview where you said a very, very striking comment. And the comment was, it's like you're giving your kid up for adoption, but you still live in the house where they're being kept.
Yeah, 100%. I would say that 10 times over because I don't think I wasn't ready for that stark contrast where it is no longer necessarily you making the decisions anymore. Like there are other stakeholders that not just own more than you in the business, but like truly like have ownership and right to make a decision in the business. And so it is that feeling of you giving your kid up for adoption and you still live in the house and you don't parent, but you obviously have an opinion on what it is. And so it just feels like you've lost something about yourself. Like because I identified so much with the success of Health-Ade and what Health-Ade was and is, like to have something felt like it was taken away from you in that sense, like whether it be the decision rights or maybe even a comment or observation, like it eats away at you at times. And then you just don't know what your place is anymore, truthfully. And so you start to feel misplaced in your own house a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel like at any point you were starting to perhaps question even the decisions that you had made in exiting, or did you still feel like, no, it was the right move and I'm on to greener pastures?
100% did not question the exit or the actual transaction. Where I was really thinking about for myself, and at the time I had just had my second baby, I was like, why am I still, like, what is my purpose here? And what do I want to do?
Yeah.
And so that question really plagued me in terms of my own decisions to stay and also what I was going to do next. And so I think I was still holding on to Health-Ade in the sense like it was my baby, but really what it was off to college. It was like doing its own thing, fully functional, like being at that point, and can thrive without us, which is honestly any founder's dream.
Yes.
And if anything, I think I was staying there to make sure it was okay. And it was. And it was ready for me to just like detach.
And at that point, when the acquisition had happened, did you have a dream of what you would do personally or with your career next? Once the Health-Ade chapter was, you knew there was going to be some period of time where you stayed on per your contract, but did you know what that next thing was or not yet?
I didn't know exactly. I knew that I wanted to take some time to rest and just really chill and, I don't know, for the lack of a better word, parent, because, just be present for some period of time. But I didn't know, what I knew is I never want to get in beverage again. I had like PTSD. I think I knew what I didn't want to do, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do because it felt like the world was my oyster. And I don't know, if you still are with me day to day, you'll probably see like a laundry list of ideas that pop up in my head. Even on the drive over here, I had like 10 ideas that came up. But I do know that generally I was called to serve women and help women just uplift in so many ways. And I've always loved that, even at Health-Ade. So I knew I wanted to do something in that realm. I just didn't know what and how.
So today, how do you personally define success?
My personal definition of success is so different than what I grew up thinking it was. It actually has no marker of like dollars in my bank account. And then at a certain point, I was like, oh, well, it's like I'm not actually tied to my calendar. I used to think I could just throw it away and think that, oh, I'm successful because I don't have to be tied to anything. Now, my definition of success is just being energized when I wake up and so excited to tackle that thing today. And so whether it be like with my kids or working on a newsletter or building the new businesses I'm starting to build, I want to feel just excited to get after it. And the second that I'm not is when something's gone awry in my kind of success calculation.
Yeah, I think you hit on some really interesting points because so many people strive their entire lives to get to where you are now, where you've had a successful exit, very financially beneficial to you and your family, and now you have more flexibility than ever before. But there's also this other side of the spectrum where all of that flexibility, especially when you're not tied to a very specific company and you've been building it for so long, the weightlessness of it all can also be very confusing.
Totally. I mean, for such a long time post-exit, I felt like a dandelion in the wind because maybe you could say I was confused, but also I wasn't resolute to like what was holding me down to anything. And so like I was able to like dabble in this and dabble in that and try that, or I would go to lunch with X, Y, and Z. So I felt like time was this like sand, like going through that little hourglass, right? It was just going and I wasn't taking hold of it. And so I just felt like reactive, and that was the opposite of where I wanted to be, actually. So I need to actually take hold of my calendar, take hold of my time. where do I want to spend my time? Who do I want to spend it with? And I had to get clear on that because I started to feel like, oh, swaying with the wind and I'm just going to hang out. That was like the opposite of where I wanted to be.
Especially as a founder, building a beverage business, even if you weren't necessarily in charge of production or ops all the time, you were an operational, gritty, let's get it done kind of person because you needed to be. So I'd imagine that is almost inherent in what you enjoy doing too. So the life of leisure or like the stay at home, lifestyle isn't necessarily for you. And it doesn't have to be. Just because you have money doesn't mean that you need to be just at home.
Yeah, I actually love being productive. Yeah. I love creating something of value. And there's something to be said about like working with your hands or like working with your mind or allowing it to create something beautiful or something that you didn't even intend, but it's going somewhere. And so I miss that.
Yeah. So now, well past the Health-Ade chapter, you are an investor and advisor to different companies. So first question is, would you be able to share any of the companies that are in your portfolio that you're really excited about?
Yeah, so I am on the board of Sanzo, which is a sparkling water company. I'm also advising Ginza, which is a female founder I love, and it's a sparkling ginseng brand, a beverage. So even though I don't want to actually have a beverage of my own, I can invest and I can also advise in this world that I know very well. A couple other investments that I made that I love the founder. I love what they're trying to do. Fly by Jing, Win Coffee. Again, they're female, Asian entrepreneurs, really trying to stand up in this world and make a name, not just for themselves, but also for like where they came from. And I love that type of representation.
And do you see your future, however long we want to say, the next 5 years, you continuing to invest in this space, advise? Do you see any part of you that thinks, okay, when I'm getting those 10 ideas in the car on the drive over, one of them may be compelling enough where I want to start something again?
So I don't know if this is a controversial take or not, but I actually think angel investing is not the way to make money and not the way to support brands, honestly, because they can get the capital that they need isn't necessarily going to be the size of capital from your like 5, 10, 25K check. And from the investor side, you're not going to make the millions off of that. And I think I started to look at some of these angel investments as like almost charity sometimes, like, oh, I'm going to help them by writing them a check. That's the probably like worst form of criteria to like invest. And so I stopped doing that. So I don't see myself angel investing too much. If anything, it's more like within my criteria of why I would invest. But I definitely would love to help support female entrepreneurs in the beverage space, however I can, from insights, experience, and whatever that looks like. But I think most of all, I'm excited about doing my own thing. There's lots of aspects that I'm excited about, whether it be in the kids space, in the I just turned 40 and I am in this new phase of life. I call it the pause life. It's like perimenopause, menopause is on the horizon. I'm in this middle period. So there's lots in this space that I think is exciting to dig into. And, I'm looking into it.
Ooh, I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited to have you on again and you'll tell me about any potential thing you're building.
Cool.
So the next section is going to be questions that I ask every guest. So the first one is, can you share a system that you have in place that benefits your career or business? And it can be a system for anything.
Yeah, so it's something that I got from our couples therapist. And I truly think to have a successful career or thrive in business, like the village that surrounds you is so important. And in this case, me and my husband, like we started having just systems in terms of how we communicate. So we'll have 3 meetings, not to add more meetings to anyone's calendar, but on Sunday night, we'll just do like a quick logistical check-in around, okay, so who's doing what in terms of like kid things that week or that month, and we'll kind of plan that out. Our second meeting is one that we do monthly. So it's kind of like our goals and finances meeting. And so it's like we set out goals from the beginning of the year. Like, are we on track to hit them? Are we doing what we said we would do? Are we tracking regarding like the money that we're spending or not spending, or things that we want to invest in? And then our third is more of like our relationship. And so, yes, we do the regular date nights, but I don't know, people out there, if date nights become kind of this thing that you do just because you're supposed to go on a date night. So we actually do like this half a day thing, like every 6 weeks. We don't call it a date night, but it's truly just us. And I guess you could call it a date activity, but we're just, again, like regrouping about where we are, talking about what resentment we're holding on to, and we let it go right there. And so I would say it's more of a meeting system with my partner that allows us to stay on the same page.
I love that, especially as someone who is incredibly busy. You have so much going on like yourself. It's helpful to have structure around when you're talking to your partner about life stuff, about personal stuff, especially you have kids as well. So it's like, not only are you doing everything in your career and professionally, but now a marriage is a partnership. Totally. And you need a communication system with any partner that you have, business or personal. So actually my husband and I have a similar thing. It's not quite as structured, but we have a Sunday night check-in where we'll talk about stuff that we have going on that week. Same thing, like logistics and operations between us. And then just something that we are like really grateful for. And it helps to keep us grounded.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so important.
So the next question comes from the Social Currency Corner, where I get your input on a trend or story that's impacting business and culture. So especially because you are a CPG guru, the acquisition market is very hot in CPG. So far we've seen, just even this year alone, there's been Poppy, Lesser Evil, there's been tons. Do you think that these acquisitions will continue to be as hot over the next 12 months? Why or why not?
So yes, I do think it'll continue to be hot. Like, keep in mind, like the diligence on these probably have been well over like 6 months to a year on these that were acquired. And the trend that I don't think is going to go anywhere is that these larger strategics need innovation and need health and wellness brands that serve their consumer in a way that they just can't innovate quick enough or actually reach, because they're just these large companies that are used to doing things a certain way, especially with the FDA taking out food, like colored dyes by 2026. I foresee that some of these larger CPG brands will just continue to look at brands that are hitting a consumer base that they can't hit and are uniquely connected to them, have a unique health and wellness benefit, and not just a flash in the pan trend, but something that is actually resonating with a health and wellness like core foundational thought. And like that's not going to go away. And the innovation that they can, either choose to build or buy, I just think they're going to continue to try and buy what they can't build.
Great. Okay. Final question. Let's end with some advice. So for this part, I ask listeners to submit their questions for you. And I picked one that I thought was really interesting. So you launched Health-Ade before it was as mainstream as it is today, obviously. What is your advice for launching a product that takes a lot of consumer education to get to the next level? How should I think about educating the customer when education can be expensive?
Yeah, that's a great question. So 3 things. One is, having this direct connection with your consumer. In our case, we had farmers markets to kind of test our messaging really helped, because I could say, like, have you ever tried kombucha before? No, what's kombucha? And be like, oh, it's a fermented tea. And then launch into the whole science aspect. You see their eyes kind of glaze, like roll back to their heads, and you lost them, right? I think it's a great testing ground. So find the testing ground that you can test the message that's hitting, whether that be through digital A/B tests or, going out literally to your major mall and just saying like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? So that's one, is hone the message. 2 is being early in a trend isn't a bad thing, and like having to educate isn't a bad thing. That often gives you more speaking time on like what your brand is. But I would really be clear on why your brand is differentiated, and like make that the hallmark of, and like say that a million times everywhere, because I heard this in a conference, and I do think it really helped Health-Ade. Like, a consumer will really only pick up your brand after being disrupted 7 times. And so if they're hearing that message 7 times and like physically disrupted in their, places that they usually go, like they'll interact with your brand somehow. And you want to make sure that they don't get like dilution of that message that you're wanting them to hear. And then the third thing is, if you're passionate about this product or this trend or the category that you're in, like don't lose hope. Like definitely stick with it, but don't hold I'm terrible with idioms, but like don't hold things so closely and like be in your own echo chamber that you're not willing to change how you're talking about it, because it could just be small, simple tweaks that really start to resonate. So don't be one of those founders who's like in their own echo chamber and like not willing to like listen to feedback.
Ooh, I love those. And I feel like those are really actionable, not even just to people who are building something that needs consumer education, but just to founders more generally.
Yeah.
So, Vanessa, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for coming on. I think what you've built is incredibly inspiring, impressive, and you have built the definition of a household product. So many people can learn from your story. And I will link Vanessa on socials. I'll put the handles in the show notes. And my recommendation is that you also follow her on Instagram, because she has some amazing videos on there just about entrepreneurship more generally that I really enjoyed watching when I was preparing for this interview.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me, Sammy. This is so fun.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Social Currency. I've been wanting to launch this show for so long. I can't tell you how excited I am to do this and how thrilled I am that you're actually here listening. It means the world to me. If you liked what you heard today, please rate and review the podcast, because it massively helps to support the work I do to bring the show to life. And if you want to keep up with the hottest business lore in real time, follow me on Instagram at Sammy Cohen Talks and subscribe to my newsletter, Social Currency, which is linked in the show notes. Social Currency is a production of Social Currency Media and Money News Network. The podcast is hosted and executive produced by me, Sammy Cohen. Social Currency is produced by the Money News Network team. See you next time.